So Neil deGrasse Tyson gave an interview on NPR that really pissed me off like 10 times in 5 minutes, and I wanted to talk about it. I'm kind of a math and science genius. I love science. I think science is great, so I'm not anti-science. I do have a problem with how science is so resistant to new ideas. Like, rest in peace to the guy who invented the Higgs boson. I think his name was Higgs, and he came up with the idea in 1964, and it took him like 50 years to test it and prove it and give him the Nobel Prize. So when there's new ideas that contradict the scientific understanding, science is very hesitant to consider them. And so I think that's where a lot of my ideas come from. And I haven't had the community or influence or resources to prove these things, but science does eventually prove my ideas true. So, like, for instance, I'd said the Big Bang was bullshit since the 80s, since I first found out about it, and just could tell it was bullshit. It's a projection of masculine patriarchy ideas and instruments, a projection of what we learn from those instruments within a masculine and patriarchal mindset that comes up with crazy ideas like the Big Bang that just don't make any sense. And I think recently they've strayed away from it or modified it or said there's lots of Big Bangs or, whatever, to try to preserve it but admit that it's complete BS. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson had an answer to a question about the end of the universe. It's again based on Big Bang based physics, the idea that the universe is spreading out and will eventually collapse, is what they used to say, collapse back into a single point or something that didn't make sense, book into the Big Bang. Now he's saying it will continue to expand and just lose all energy, die out in a whimper, or tear itself apart, which I've heard before. So I don't know if Neil deGrasse Tyson's actually a scientist, if other scientists actually respect him, or if he's just an entertainer who's supposed to be good at communicating the current common knowledge about science. But that is kind of the common conception, and it just doesn't make any sense and shouldn't be the way we think about things. We should be able to tell, hey, have a BS detector in science. Now, he uses his BS detector to deny aliens. When a lady asked about frequent radio bursts, he's like, well, we used to think it could be aliens, but now we know for a fact it definitely can't be aliens. We have to rule out aliens, at all costs. We have to test every other possibility before we even consider aliens. And his rationale for that was, well, if we call it aliens, then we stop thinking about it. We just call it aliens and stop thinking about it. No, if you call it aliens, you could still have the science of how the aliens do things. I think basically just afraid of the fact that, you get a whole nother course in science once you actually establish or admit alien contact. And he seemed to have a very strong agenda, like he's being paid to keep anybody from thinking this way. And that's really sad, but you can see what his real agenda and who's paying him to do this by the end of the thing, which is what really pissed me off. Somebody else asked him about black holes. He said if you went into a black hole, you would look behind you and see the future history of our universe, whatever that means. And if you went forward, you would go into another universe. So he's validating some sci-fi idea for that, but not for aliens, and saying that he would want to be sent into a black hole when he dies. Like, that could even happen. And to see what it looks like, just validating these ideas, these pseudoscience ideas, while completely dismissing aliens as if that's the only potentially pseudoscience idea, or it could just be science we don't understand yet, that you have to dismiss. When you think about it, all things from the future that go into the past are seen as magical when they're scientific technology. So science is kind of like magic until it becomes science, until you discover it. So that gets into the last thing he said that really pissed me off. He was like, well, the liberals say that the conservatives are climate deniers, so they're anti-science, which they are. And they're anti-mask, anti-vax, all these things that are trying to destroy the planet. But the liberals are the ones where you find astrology and crystals and feather. Yeah, and those could be things that science just doesn't understand yet. And if you were a responsible scientist, you'd admit that lots of things science doesn't understand yet. And that's what the fun is. Or it could be something that, even if it is complete BS, crystals and astrology and stuff like that, they don't hurt anybody. Whereas denying climate change can hurt everybody. So to equate denying climate change with crystals just shows what agenda Neil deGrasse Tyson has. And it shows that if he's denying aliens,